welcome back to this book nook. I promise you that the moving vlog will be coming up after this. This is the last video in this bungalow area. You can see all of the packing boxes. I am taking you along on the process of that, and thank you if you have watched the latest video, and sorry for the big gap. Life has been lifing along quite a bit, but I really wanted to come at you with a good old, I feel like it's, I'm going to put it in quote marks, old school booktuber kind of video. You know, the ones where people are just in their bedrooms, I'm in my pajamas, I've got a cup of tea here, but you'll be able to tell from the title of this video that I am sharing 10 recommendations of books which are psychological kind of books. They're not necessarily all, actually, are they all thrillers? No, they're not all thrillers. A lot of thrillers, some like mystery kind of ones, a few contemporaries, but books that I would recommend if you are wanting to read a book that kind of screws with your mind. So if you want some psychological recommendations, grab yourself a pen and paper, or I don't know, what do the kids use these days, and join along for these next 10 recommendations. Now, the first book is a classic and it is a goodie. It's on here for a reason, and that is Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar. This follows Esther. Now, Esther Greenwood is a brilliant, beautiful, she's got her life together, from the outside looking in kind of person. However, what we see throughout this novel is her spiral downwards of like having a mental breakdown. She tries different things in her life, and it's kind of like, I suppose, like a quarter life crisis. I can't remember her exact age, but I read it as if she was in her 20s, so I kind of related to her feeling of everything being quite overwhelming. It's one of these psychological books where you don't realise you're quite caught up into a spiral until you're already in it and you're being carried along with Esther, and Plath does this job of giving you hope. The triggers on this one, sorry if I don't get them all, by the way. I always try write them down and record them, but I'm only human, I might miss them, so please do your research. But the triggers I picked up on are suicide, suicidal attempts, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, to the point of like intense alcoholism, depression, anxiety, hospitals, and needles. Okay, let's keep trucking along. Next up I have We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. This is a YA novel from the perspective of basically a bunch of cousins and a friend, and their families are super duper rich, and they're all like, I guess they're cousins, they're all related, so they've got a decent amount of money in the past of their family, so they bought this island and like built all these houses, and every summer all the family meets up, and we follow our main character, who is called Cadence. I read this book a wee while ago. I do have my notes. I honestly don't know how booktubers do it so that they just have everything up here. I cannot do that. I'm just keeping it real. I've got my notes here. This follows Cadence, and her whole thing is her friendships are falling apart, and her grandfather recently had passed away, so she's grieving him, and she has like a lot of inner turmoil happening. But the big psychological element of this is that Cadence, in her past, has had some sort of traumatic event where she no longer remembers what happened. So something happened in her life, she doesn't know what happened. So as we're seeing all this friendship turmoil and her grief, she's also trying to piece together things that happened. And so you've got like this dealing of memory loss, which again, I feel like this is going to be a common trope throughout a lot of these recommendations, is that you've got an unreliable narrator. You don't know if what Cadence can remember is true or not. Triggers on this one: death, burns, amnesia, divorce, trauma, PTSD, and suicidal thoughts. Next up is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This one was one of my favourite books of the year when I read it. Was it last year? 2 years ago? 2 years ago. I really love it, and this is a book which I really can't delve too much into with the blurb, because it's actually a decently quick, short, fast-paced book, and I don't want to spoil anything, because the whole point of this book is that Piranesi is in this where he's living, and he's experiencing different rooms, and it's quite imaginative, and he's trying to figure out where he is. So all I can really tell you is he's lost. He doesn't know where he is. He's all by himself. There's nobody with him to help him figure things out. And you're just following Piranesi. You're with him on this journey of figuring out what the hell's going on. I should also mention this one's fantasy, so it's kind of like random things hanging off walls, walls moving, things which make no sense occurring on the regular basis. This one, you have a fear of drowning, like there's a risk of drowning, so if that's something that you don't like, obviously that's an element, and loneliness. I think those are the big ones. There's nothing too traumatic that happens. So yeah, as I was saying, next up is Red Dragon. This is Robert Harris's first book in the Hannibal Lecter series, and I've talked about it a few times because this is one of those series which really surprised me in how much I loved it. Red Dragon is a thriller, and it's about this guy who basically goes around killing, raping, like he's a serial killer, and we then follow our detective, what's his name again, Will Graham, as he's trying to figure out who's doing all of this. But we've got multiple perspectives in this book. We've got Will Graham's perspective and the Red Dragon, who is the serial killer, and his perspective. So it's very much like a cat and mouse. We're watching a detective try catch the guy, we're watching the guy evade the detective, and the whole time you grow to realize that the Red Dragon, like all serial killers, is not clinically sane. He's not doing so hot flash up there, and it's interesting because you get insight into the killer's mind, which I don't feel like you get in many thrillers. And I mean, I'm not what I was going to call a dictionaryist. I am not a professor of literary terminology. I mean, I'm an English teacher, so maybe I should be able to call myself that. But you know, I just read for fun. I just read for fun. So I don't know where the barriers are clear cut for whether something's psychological or not, but I found that this book was really twisty turny. Whoa, I'm in the mind of some, like, a killer, and what he's doing makes sense for him, and you figure out, or you don't figure out, you're told why he is how he is, what built up to that, and it's freaky, and it's fun, and it's twisted. So yeah, triggers, killing, murder, rape, just some like weird gross stuff going on, traumatic backstories and histories of people, and biting. Let's just leave it at that, biting. Next up we have Gillian Flynn's The Gone Girl, again a classic psychological thriller, but if you haven't read it, oh, you've got to. So this is about Nick and his wife, namely that Nick's wife goes missing, and as the police come knocking being like, yo bro, where's your wife, he discovers that he thinks he's being framed for her kidnapping and murder, because there's these weird searches that come up on his device which he claims he never put in there, and then there's all of this like evidence that's being pulled out of the cracks in his story, in Nick's story, and he's like, what, but that wasn't me. But everything, fingerprints, everything points to him. So you're like, what's going on with Nick? Is he does he have something going on where he can't remember what he's done? Is he being framed? And I have to say, the revelation at the end was fantastic. I loved it. To be fair, this is, I think, the book that got me hooked on thrillers, and the psychological element of this, it was just done really well. It was done really well. Unfortunately, for some reason, I don't have a written review, so I don't have like the triggers written down, but I do know off the top of my head that it's, you know, it's about talks of, was his wife sexually abused, murder, being set up potentially, and that sort of stuff. I don't remember anything being too gruesome though, but again, please double check. I read this book a while ago, so I'm almost definitely missing things. Alright, next up is Challenger Deep by Neal Shusterman, and this is a young adult contemporary, almost like a mental health kind of book, and it follows our main character called Caden. Now Caden, how do I explain this book again without giving things away? This is the hard thing about like mystery, thriller, unraveling kind of stories. I feel like reading the blurb is the best. So Caden is on a ship that's headed for the deepest point on Earth, Challenger Deep, the southern part of the Marianas Trench. So he's in this ship. He is also a brilliant high school student whose friends, start to realize he's acting a little bit odd. He is designated the ship's artist in resident to document the journey, so he likes to draw and he journals visually. And then he pretends to join the school track team. However, he spends his days just walking for miles, absorbed by the thoughts in his head. So he is split between his allegiance to the captain of the ship and the allure of mutiny. And I just have to leave it there. I have to leave it there. It's really good. I just do yourself a favour and read it. It was a fast read as well. How many pages is it? 320 pages on the Kindle edition. I don't know what that is in book, but it's a decently short book. I think I read it in 2 days. We actually have a Stephen King on this list. Now, this is from the book called 4 Past Midnight, but it's actually 4 books within a book. So like an anthology, but they're not short stories. They're 250 pages each story. So you know the size of Stephen King books. And the book in particular is called Secret Window, Secret Garden. Now this is about Morton. Now Morton is an author and he then gets accused of plagiarizing, we'll just call him Mystery Man, plagiarizing Mystery Man's book. Now Mystery Man comes in and is like, bruh, I'll kill ya. I'll kill ya. You plagiarized my book. And Morton's like, I didn't plagiarize your book, man. But then the psychological element is that nobody can see Mystery Man. And the reason this one's on my list is because, reading is personal for everyone. For me, this was my first novel book. Experiencing such intense confusion from the narrator's point of view, and he doesn't seem like an unreliable narrator. So you're reading this and you're like, everything Morton is saying, Morton or Norton? Morton. Everything Morton is saying makes perfect sense. You follow him down logical pathways of thought. You also see the Mystery Man from his point of view, because the novel's from his point of view. And so you're like, is everyone else just gaslighting him? What's going on? And the revelation I really enjoyed. I will say, Stephen King, give yourself some time to get into it, because it took me about 50 pages, I think, before I was fully absorbed. But it's worth it for the, I almost want to say, slow burn psychological revelation. Next up we have AJ Finn, The Woman in the Window. Now, I think out of all of the books on here, this is the best plot twist out of all of the books. This is, if you read nothing else from this list, I also really love Piranesi, but for psychologicalness, read The Woman in the Window by AJ Finn. Do yourself a favour. As you can tell, this is about a woman in a window. Great, Bethany. So this is about Anna. She lives in New York, in a suburban area. She lives in a house, but she cannot go outside. She cannot go outside because of personal trauma, and her reason for the personal trauma, not the reason, her personal traumatic experience is slowly revealed to you throughout the book. So she is basically trapped in her house, and she looks out the window when she's bored and basically spies on the neighbours. She knows way too much about her neighbours, more than any neighbour should know about the others. And one day a new family moves in across the road and she witnesses something she shouldn't have witnessed. And in classic gaslighting fashion, she calls the police and is like, yo, I just saw this thing. And turns out what she saw, is it a spoiler to tell you? I don't think it's a spoiler to tell you. It's not a spoiler. I'll keep it vague. She witnesses a murder, so she calls it in. But what happens from there, that's the catalyst for all of these questions, because basically she's being gaslit. What she saw happened didn't happen, or did it? We don't know. And because we don't know Anna's whole story, so whilst we don't know what trauma she experienced, we can definitely tell that there's something going on in her head. And I think I said it best in my review, to be honest. I said what makes this book really interesting is that Finn takes you on a journey of the effects of trauma without the reader having to know everything that happened to the survivor and our victim. Obviously, I can't say too much, but as things are slowly revealed to us, pulling aside the curtain so that we ourselves can peep in, oof, what a good reviewer. We get to see the reader. We get to see as the reader peeps into Anna's life. I really hope I've done this somewhat justice. I think it is a really good book. At one point I literally put it down and I was like, wow, okay. And I had to pause and let that revelation sink in. It was good. Okay, jumping back into, oh, my tea's almost finished. Jumping back into YA, we have The Somebody Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. I will admit, I originally picked this up because of Instagram, like an Instagram made me do it kind of book, but I don't regret it. I think for a YA psychological thriller, it has a good balance of all elements needed without, like, I don't know, dumbing it down for a younger audience. So we follow Makani, and Makani's new to this town, and she thinks she's finally starting to fit in. However, her classmates start dying off one by one. And this really cool psychological element of this book is that there are chapters interspersed within the novel where you see the victim's point of view, and there's just like creepy little things happening. Like the first chapter in this book is possibly one of the best first chapters I've read in terms of hooking me in. I will say that I did give this book 3 stars because whilst that first chapter is brilliant, I did find the middle a little bit slower for how I personally like my thriller books. But I think it was really cool trying to figure it out. This is one of those books where I was genuinely trying to figure out what was happening alongside Makani, and I couldn't. That's not saying much. I never really successfully figure out murder mystery things. I also don't try too hard because I don't want to ruin the story for myself, but it was cool to be able to feel the terror that the victims felt. So that was pretty awesome. I don't know if you'd call it psychological, just more like it messed with your brain. It was like there are elements of really good horror which messed with your brain. And we're out of tea. But let's talk about the last book, and this is the latest book that I've actually read that's psychological, and it is Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. I really probably butchered that that author name, sorry. Again, a classic. I would put this with Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar, Gillian Flynn's, what was it called? Gone Girl, in terms of 3 books that I think I would consider psychological classics and psychological thriller classics, in terms of if you're interested in reading some adult psychological thriller books, put these 3 on your list. I highly recommend them. So this book follows 2 characters, our narrator and Tyler. Our narrator is depressed, he's unhappy, he's just going through the motions, looking for more. He then meets Tyler. Tyler is enigmatic, characteristic, that's not the word. By the way, for context, it's like 9 p.m. on a school night right now, so my brain has definitely fried. What word was I looking for? Can I even see it in the blurb? Was I copying the blurb? No, I don't. My brain stopped. He's just really I mean, he's an enigma. Now Tyler starts Fight Club. 2 guys go into a bar and they just fight. That's all it is. It's Fight Club. And as this book progresses, Tyler's, I don't want to say greed, his ambition kind of starts to get really out of hand. He starts recruiting people to his cause. He starts becoming really unreliable as a person. And so what happens to us as a reader as we follow this is we're like, because we can see a lot of the narrator's point of view. I think it's all from the narrator's point of view, yeah. You see this unraveling of character from both the narrator and Tyler. The whole time I was reading it, I was like, what's going on here? There's something that isn't adding up. And when it's revealed, I'm like, of course, that makes so much sense. So those are my 10 psychological recommendations. If you have any, please let me know, because I've just decided to add everything that sounds relatively interesting on my TBR shelf because life is short. So any psychological recommendations to make for myself or for the other people watching this video, please leave them in a comment down below. Again, sorry for being a bit MIA recently. I'm really excited to be back. I'm gonna try so hard now that we're moving into our own place in like 3 days, 3 sleeps, excuse me, Wednesday sleep, Thursday sleep, Friday sleep, 3 sleeps. I'll be able to vlog a lot more because I don't have to worry about the little ones around, and like I'll be filming in my own space, so I'm really excited. Anyway, I'm gonna try stop rambling so this video can hopefully stay like close to the 20-minute mark. So thank you again for making it to the end of this video. Enjoy all the places you go in your own reading adventures. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.